let's start the session. So thank you very much, by the way, for tuning in today. I think this is the last session that we going to share together with looking at karma, the presentation of karma. And what I thought of focusing on today is the practice of purification, or practices of purification in general. And I hope that from this point onward, we'll be able to look at different things that happen to us in our life, what we do in our life, cultivating an ethical behavior in light of maybe slightly better understanding of karma. And of course, not only the understanding of karma is required, but even more so a constant reflection on karma and try to develop a better trust, a deeper sense of trust, maybe not a better, but a deeper sense of trust in the working of karma. So that will also affect the way that we interact with ourselves and interact with others. And so I see that Joker came in and says that Joker was admitted to a waiting room or something like that. So I hope that Joker can hear us and participate.
Is that still on your screen? She should be in.
Okay.
Venerable, so you missed that we've been having some problems with people joining our meetings and being completely inappropriate. So what we've decided for now is once the meetings start, we don't close it, but we have people in the waiting room, and whoever happens to be a host or co-host, so in this case you, because you share your own slides, they'll all get that notification and we can let people in then that way.
No worries. Cool.
Thank you.
No worries. It reminds me that when COVID started and everyone started to work with Zoom, we had a few cases of people bombing on Zoom sessions. And so we had a massive Guru Puja happening at the Gompa, and we also Zoomed it to many of our members, but no one was really manning the station with the Zoom. And so someone came in and started to display pornographic material on a Guru Puja page and so forth. So I think that maybe for the people at home, it was more interesting than for people at the Gompa. We were like chanting, ringing the bells, and someone else was having a really good time on Zoom. Anyway, and so unfortunately, that's part of our afflicted world, people kind of creating deliberate disturbance for each other, unfortunately. But we're going to try to set it aside for a few minutes. I'm going to open the recitation page file, and we'll correct the motivation with refuge and bodhicitta before we'll start for today. And so to begin with, let's just take a few seconds to calm our mind. We can start with taking a few deep breaths. And then we can scan our body from our toes all the way to the crown. You can do it on your own time and your own pace. And if you find any point in the body that is either sensitive or uncomfortable, a bit tight, try to mentally lean into it gently. And if it helps, you can release it with an out breath, beginning with the toes, the back of the feet, then going up to our legs and knees and thighs, releasing them as well, and the lower abdomen, releasing the shoulders, and softening our palms and our arms. Keeping the mouth slightly open, the tip of the tongue is resting on the upper palate, releasing stress or discomfort from the jaws. And also relaxing the cheeks, softening the eyes, and relaxing our forehead. And turning our attention to the breathing process, counting a round of 21 breaths. And each breath is an anchor for a mind that becomes more focused, more stable, and trying to, as we're breathing in and out, to pay attention to aspect of clarity and an aspect of stability. These two are essential aspects to our concentration. And so we're going to tighten our mind around the breathing process, counting a round of 21 breaths. And so the beginning of our session, when we correct the motivation, we want to do it in a way that will turn our discussion into a practice of the Dhamma, and we do it through going for refuge. And we also turn our discussion to be a Mahayana Dhamma practice based on compassion and bodhicitta. And we're using the verse composed by Atisha with a small change to fashion our motivation into refuge and bodhicitta. And so to begin with, when we create the first two causes for going for refuge, fear and faith, the type of fear that we have is not a debilitating type of fear, but a state of mind in which we recognize that in the cycles of samsara, in which we are born and die countless times, we always end up getting what we do not want, which is pain or suffering, dissatisfaction, not having a perfect situation, stable and solid situation, but something which is often for us completely out of control. Though we do not we do not want to be born with suffering and pain, to get aged, to get sick, to die. We do not want to experience the pain of becoming separated from everything that is dear to our heart. We do not want to encounter things that cause us displeasure. And there's always something beyond our reach. Looking for it, we cannot find it. It is our share in samsara because we're still under the control of karma and afflictions. And so we think that I do not want it. But also everyone around me, particularly those who are close to my heart in this life, my family members, my friends, my colleagues, near and far, and also countless other people that I know or might be complete strangers to me, and also other living beings go through similar situations. And internally, they're just like me, having no sense of control and still seeking happiness and well-being. And so the way for us to emerge from that samsaric cycle, but also to be able to be of greater benefit to everyone around us, is to develop our mind. And so to develop our mind, we begin with going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the teacher, the Dhamma. Not only the teachings that the Buddha gave us, but more internally, the insight into reality, from coarser levels of reality to subtle level of reality. And the cessations of not only suffering, but the cause of suffering. That for us would be a true refuge. And also the Sangha, Arya Bodhisattvas as spiritual teachers that mediate the teachings of the Buddha to us. But in a final sense, a true refuge would be our own becoming of Buddha, the development of Dhamma in a mind stream, and our own becoming of a Sangha. And so with a deep sense of reliance, we think, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. But the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. But the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. But the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right. And so in our previous session, after having looked at the presentation of the 10 parts of non-virtues, I briefly spoke about the opposite of that, which are the parts of virtues, which means not only abstaining from non-virtues, but also deliberately acting in a way that abstains from them. And so when we think of the presentation of a precious human rebirth, when we connect it back to the presentation of a precious human rebirth, it is said that the meditation consists of 4 main points on a precious human rebirth. First of all, we recognize our fortunate situation. We were born as free and fortunate human beings. That's the first point, recognizing that. Second point is recognizing how it is of a great advantage that we can not only improve our situation in this life, but mainly improve our fortune in future lifetimes and beyond. Fortune in terms of good states of rebirth, and then the state of liberation and enlightenment. The third point in the presentation is thinking of how difficult it is to create the causes for a precious human rebirth, how it is so difficult to find it. And of the 3 main causes that were taught by the Buddha to produce a precious human rebirth, the first one is called guarding pure ethical discipline. And so guarding pure ethical discipline is the very foundation for securing a good state of rebirth in our next lifetime. And so when we think about it in light of what we've spoken of in the previous session, part of the things that we've mentioned was a classification of causes into projecting causes or projecting karma and completing karma. And so in terms of projecting karma that we want to create that will lead us from this state of rebirth as free and fortunate human beings to a future rebirth, which is similar to that. I mean, not only that, I mean, how great it would be if I were to meet with my teachers again in my next lifetime. I mean, how dismal it would be if I would be completely bereft of that opportunity to meet them again, to do it over and over again. It would be completely, in some sense, you could say that it would be a disaster if I'm not going to be able to do it. And so the projecting cause that I create in terms of securing good state of rebirth from the next lifetime is guarding pure ethical discipline that abstains from the 10 non-virtues. And so to guard pure ethical discipline, we don't have to be monks and nuns. No, it's not that only monks and nuns can create the causes for a good state of rebirth in the next lifetime. Everyone here, all of us can do it. In that, no, we don't need to have necessarily the Bodhisattva vow or the Tantric vow to create good causes for a future rebirth. It's for us, if we develop a mind of abstention, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, covetousness, malice, and wrong views. And a mind of abstention is a mind in which we, first of all, recognize the drawbacks of these negative actions. And so we recognize that negative actions lead to suffering. And we spoke briefly of different types of results of actions. So there is a ripening result in terms of the birth that we take. It is called also a fruitional result. We also spoke of causally concordant effects and also environmental effects. And so there are effects in the environment linked up with killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth. Causally concordant effect are there in terms of the experiences that we have. If we, for example, if we harm others, we are harmed in return. If we kill others, we experience shorter life, more sickness. We're also being in danger due to others and so forth. So these are causally concordant effect in terms of our experience. But the worst one is in terms of our behavior. In that when we develop habits with negative actions, we tend to do them again and again. And so that we have an uninterrupted almost flow of negative actions that compound our future suffering, future rebirth, future experiences, future tendencies, and so forth. And so when we recognize the effects of our negative actions, we can develop a mind of abstention. And so guarding pure ethical discipline is the very foundation for an ethical behavior, very foundation of a precious human rebirth in a next lifetime. And we might be thinking that it doesn't mean that to have pure ethical discipline, I need not perform any negative action ever again in the future. Like, for example, if I tell a white lie, or if I call pest control to my house, does it mean that there is no chance whatsoever for me to attain a precious human rebirth in my next lifetime? Is it game over for me? Well, it doesn't mean that. To guard pure ethical discipline does not mean to say that we will never, ever, ever, forever not do anything negative, because otherwise it would have meant that it would be impossible for us to be born as human being in a precious human rebirth. It would be impossible for anyone to do it. After all, so long as the mind is still under the control of karma, afflictions, we'll still end up, even if we do not want to do that, we still end up creating negative actions. And so to guard pure ethical discipline would first of all mean that when we recognize that we do perform negative actions, we do not sweep them under the carpet. We recognize them. In order to recognize them, we need to, first of all, understand what constitute negative actions, positive actions, negative actions, virtuous actions, non-virtuous actions. We need to understand what they are, but also we need to sustain mindfulness and alertness. We also need to be conscientious about our behavior. And then once we perform negative actions, we want to lay them down with practices of purification as soon as we can. So rather than thinking that, it doesn't really matter, I'll do it later, we want to do it as soon as we can. I mean, not in a being out of control, panic kind of mode, but just not to postpone our practices of purification. But also, in order to do that, we also need to make sure that we do not play down the power of the negative actions that we perform, because sometimes we think that, yeah, I know it wasn't a good thing to do. It was slightly negative, but actually it doesn't really matter. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't a biggie. And so we don't want to become dismissive not only of negative actions that we perform, but also we do not want to become dismissive of the ethical discipline that we choose to uphold, or we do not want to look down on the vows that we have, particularly for those of you who have taken the refuge vow before, and you might have made some commitments in relation to either your refuge vow, or if you're taking the bodhisattva vow. There are some commitments that we make in relation to the vow, but also in relation to the teachers that we have taken those vows from. So if we think that, for example, yeah, I know that I should abstain from drinking because this is the promise that I made. I'm just going to have it once. It doesn't really matter. One time is not a big deal. So, if we become dismissive about the vows that we have and we kind of play down the, severity of negative actions that we do, then we are digging our own grave in a sense that we're ensuring that we're not going to be able to perfect the ethical discipline that we have. And so guarding pure ethical discipline, in short, is trying to do the right thing at the right time and being conscientious about it. Pure, not only abstaining from negative actions as much as we can, when we find out that we inevitably broke our commitment or violated our commitments, then we acknowledge that and we try to purify the negative actions that we do. If we do it well, our ethical discipline will become pure. And that's the first cause for being born as a human being with, being born as a human being in general. Then, of course, there are some other things that we want to add to that in order to create better circumstances for us as human beings. We want to encounter the Dharma again, want to continue our practice, we want to have enough to get by, we want our environment to be supportive of not only our well-being, but also of our practice. And so on top of guarding pure ethical discipline, we also then supplement that with practices such as the 6 perfections. And so we practice generosity and ethical discipline and patience and joyous effort and concentration. We develop our wisdom. All of these come together to create better circumstances for us once we are born as human beings. And also, we can think of horrible situations being born as human beings, for example, in which we don't have freedom. Like, for example, we can think of being born with a certain physical disability that not only makes it difficult for us to develop our mind in a certain way, but also on a day-to-day basis, it will make it very difficult for us to get by. We can also think of, for example, how it would be for us to be born in a place where it is not allowed to practice the Dharma. I mean, I can think about a few places, even at the present around the world, where if someone decided to leave their old faith and to become Buddhist, it'd be dangerous for them. Or situations where if you're born, for example, as a woman in a certain, in certain environments, certain conditions, many options in your life are going to be completely blocked. And so not only we want to attain not only we want to attain a human rebirth, we want also all the other conditions to be conducive for us to continue to develop our mind. And so we need the practices of the 6 perfections, such as generosity, to create those conditions for us. And then the last cause is said to be at the very end of our life. We need to link it up with making stainless aspirational prayers. Now, to make stainless aspirational prayers is to be understood not as just kind of simply sitting down and making prayers, but to engender a positive state of mind, a virtuous state of mind, being on the verge of death. And so there is a brief moment just before death in which it is said, this is how it is explained in the Buddhist tradition. If a state of mind is virtuous, it will activate projecting karma that we have placed upon a mind stream. This karma will be activated, and the next rebirth will be a good state of rebirth. If the state of mind that we have before death, in that brief moment, is a non-virtuous state of mind, non-virtuous state of mind, I think that most people die, or I don't know if most, but many people die with fear, in manner of great commotion, with maybe leaving things unresolved, not being able to give up, to relinquish on things that they've accomplished in this life. And so having, dying with anger, with fear, with attachment and so forth, is linked up with activating a non-virtuous seed that was placed previously upon a mental continuum. So we have a non-virtuous projecting karma. When that is activated, next rebirth is going to be a rather miserable one. And so thinking of the three main causes for a good state of rebirth in the next lifetime. First off, as we said, guarding pure ethical discipline. This is something that we can do daily, improve it. Not only to create positive actions, to abstain from negative actions, also to continuously rely upon practices of purification in which we lay down negative actions that we have done before. So we will talk about it probably in the time that we left in this session. But that's the first cause, pure ethical discipline. Second cause, the practice of the 6 perfections, such as generosity. And the third one, making stainless aspirational prayers or having a virtuous state of mind before death. If we manage to cover all of our bases, even if you say, I don't want a good state of rebirth in my next lifetime, it will happen. If causes and conditions are complete, the results will be produced. And so let's go back to guarding pure ethical discipline. Before we do that, I'm wondering if we all right, any doubt or any questions regarding the things I've said so far?
And there's nothing in the chat right now.
All right. Cool. All right. And so practices of purification. Now, the word for purification in Tibetan language is often shakpa. I mean, sometimes there are a couple of words that we use, shakpa and jangwa. Now, the words in Tibetan shakpa and jangwa have a slightly different connotation, but in English, we use the same word for them. We're just going to purify negative actions. Jangwa, the second word, means to purify. It also means to train our mind. So we train at something, we purify our mind. The first word that we mentioned, shakpa, is more common in relation to purification. It has a few meanings condensed into one word. The first one is that we lay down negative actions that we have done before. So to lay them down means to desist doing them. So it's not enough to, when we think of purification of negative actions, we think about it in relation to reciting the Vajrasattva mantra, or doing practices such as the 35 Buddhas and so forth. So there's a lot of blah, blah, blah recitation that we do. Lots of recitation. Everything becomes so verbal. But actually the word, the word shakpa in Tibetan means that we lay them down. Not only kind of lay them down in that we desist doing them, but also we lay them bare and open with an ability to disclose the negative actions that we have done before. And so thinking that, when I think of some of the negative actions that I've done before, with some of them I cringe. There is that uncomfortable sensation that, I've done something pretty messy, pretty bad. And I wish that my teacher would not know that, not see that. I wish that no one else would see that ever again or talk about it ever again. And so a part of a practice of purification is to develop the ability to lay down, but also to own it. To think that I've done it. I'm not going to hide it. I've done it. I'm laying it there in front of you. I acknowledge that. And I will henceforth abstain from doing that. So all of this meaning is encapsulated into the word shakpa in Tibetan. Acknowledging it, disclosing it, laying it bare, and also committing not to do it again in the future. But then in order to encapsulate all those meanings into the process of purification, we use the 4 powers of purification. They're called the 4 antidotal powers. So that we want to lay down on negative actions, and to purify them, we use those 4 powers. If they are complete, our negative actions will become purified. If they're incomplete, even if we're going to do a lot of prostrations and circumambulation and recitation, if the 4 powers are not present in the process of purification, our negative actions will not become purified. In a sense that there might be some change that will occur, but the very strong ability to produce results will still be there. The sting will still be there. We haven't neutralized the sting of those negative actions. And so let's look at the 4 powers. Put it on the screen. Where is it? Yeah. And so I took this explanation from a previous workshop that I did together with Thupten Nobeling related to the 5 powers. So when we practice the 5 powers is a practice that involves an entire lifetime and turning every day to a Dharma practice, we also want to make sure that during the day we be having an ethical way. So to be having an ethical way would mean that we try to avoid falling prey to ignorance of self-grasping, in which we see ourselves and others and everything around us as existing in and of itself independently, objectively. So we want to reduce the power of that ignorance, but also the power of our self-cherishing and egotistical type of attitude, a self-cherishing attitude. And so during the day, we want to break the link between self-cherishing and self-grasping, our ignorance. They are responsible for all of our troubles. So we want to repudiate them through the application of antidotes. And so during the day, our mind becomes controlled by anger and attachment and jealousy and pride, strong forms or small forms. I mean, often I think that we are driven by small portions, small doses of afflictive emotions that run completely under the radar. We don't recognize them because they are kind of a small efficacy. So we want to become more aware of our mind and to apply antidotes to our afflictive emotions as we go. And so at the end of the day, or also when we find out that we have done something wrong or something that we did not want to do, something that runs counter to the ethical discipline that we want to uphold. So at the end of the day, reflect upon the things you did. Try to recall negative actions and negative emotions and purify them using the 4 powers of the antidote. Strive to do better in the future and tomorrow in particular. And so the four powers, the 4 antidotal powers are the power of support, the power of regret, the power of restraint, and the power of thorough application of the antidote. So let's begin with the power of support. The power of support is rather easy. Actually, so let's start with the power of regret before we start with the power of support. The second power is called the power of regret. And the power of regret is the most crucial power of the 4. The power of regret is about calling a spade a spade. If we recognize negative actions that we've done before, and we also develop a deep sense of regret for them, all the other powers naturally will be developed. We'll naturally develop a sense of restraint. We will naturally apply an antidote to negative actions that we've done before. If we feel no regret for negative actions that we've done before, it is likely that any practice of purification that we'll do will be contrived, will be a sham, will be a fake. So regret is the most crucial power of the 4. And so often I think that one of the teachers that I've worked with, Geshe Jamling, used to say that we can think of these 4 powers as washing machine for cleaning a mind. Now, so in order to use a washing machine in a really kind of in an effective way, we need powerful detergent. Now, the soap that we use is regret. If we have regret, other things will work out. If we don't have regret, it will not work out. And so, type of regret that we develop can be regret about what we call natural misdeeds, but also prescribed misdeeds. Let's look at the difference between the two. And so we have natural misdeeds, which means that things which are negative by nature, you don't have to be Buddhist in order to incur those natural misdeeds. You don't need to have a vow in order to incur a natural misdeed. Like, for example, any harmful actions that we do under the power of our afflictive states of mind. It doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or not. It doesn't matter if you have a vow or not. If you kill, steal, if you engage in sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, and so forth, these actions are called natural misdeeds. They are regarded in general as negative actions in our society, but also many of them are penalized in our society. Not all of them, but many of them are penalized, particularly killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. In general, they're penalized, not all forms of killing, but many of them. And so these are natural misdeeds. Now, there are things which are called prescribed misdeeds, in that they're things that might not be negative naturally, but still you've made a commitment to your teacher, to the Buddha, to the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Like, for example, drinking alcohol is not considered to be negative by nature. I mean, obviously, in our society where people do suffer from addictions, you can see the detrimental effect that that alcohol or drugs and so forth have over the life and the life of the family. So definitely we can see the detrimental effects, but still, from a Buddhist point of view, it's not regarded as negative by nature. At least in general, we can see how it is so acceptable. Drinking is so acceptable in our society. And so it is not negative by nature, but still, if you have taken a vow and you've made that commitment and you break your vow, you accumulate a fault in relation to that. And so we have not only, I think that for me as a monk, there are so many different rules in my vow of ordination. And I incur faults in relation to my vow of ordination every day. Not all of them, obviously, most of them, the vast majority of them don't cause me to break the vow, but still, I'm not doing it perfectly. And so the process of purification also involves regret for those things that I wasn't able to do perfectly. Now, I disclose them, I admit my limitation, and I hope to do better again in the future. And so when we develop the power of regret, we regret natural misdeeds, but also we add to that prescribed misdeeds. And we do that through contemplating the effects. And so we think of the effects that we spoke of before: ripening effect, death in miserable states of existence, the environmental effects, the result which is concordant with the cause in terms of our experience and in terms of our behavior. But also we can think of other ways of regretting our actions. Like, for example, when you do something which is negative, and I think that if my teacher would have seen that, it would have made him disheartened. It would have made him disheartened, but also I would be totally embarrassed. This is another thing that we can add into our regret. And so when we think of regret, I think that we tend to be very specific. It's easier to regret actions that we remember. You might wonder, how do I regret things which I just can't remember, let alone not remembering what I've done in previous lifetime. I don't remember what I've done in this life. I mean, I don't remember many of the things that I've done when I was a kid. There are some isolated incidents, things which have gone, I think, wrong, which I remember. But things I've done, so many things I can't remember. I mean, let alone when I was a kid, even yesterday and the day before, there's so many things I can't remember. Things that happened last year or 2 years ago. I mean, every once in a while, I have those recollections surfacing up of things that I've done during my 20s or 30s, which then, all of a sudden I kind of like cringe. I think that, wow, that was like a complete mess up. I wish I haven't done it before. Every once in a while, I have those flashes. But there are so many things that we can't remember. But still, I think that when we think in general about developing the power of regret, we can, if we take it up as a practice, a daily practice, we can at least start the day with thinking that today I want to guard pure ethical discipline as much as I can. And when we set our intention in this way, we have a better ability to recognize these events, the situations, the behaviors which deviate from our original intention. So we have a better ability to remember them, a better ability to then regret them later on. So then if I think of, for example, when I think of the different ways in which I harmed others in this life, during school days, during my 20s, it's not that I was a horrible, obnoxious person, but, the things that you do when you're in your teens or 20, that kind of think that was a bit pointless. That was a bit heartless or pointless. And so if I behaved in this manner in this life, it's very likely that I've done such things before. If I told lies in this life, why is it inconceivable to think that I've done it before in previous lifetime? Even if I can't remember all these events, surely I've done it. So I can bring them on, all those different actions, into the practice of purification that I do now. But not only that, we can then extend it further on to think that, actually, when I think about it in terms of the vast Buddhist presentation of thinking that we've been around since time without beginning and up until now, can we be absolutely certain that there's one negative action that we've never done before? I mean, even if we can't remember what we've done, I mean, sometimes I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. But can I be absolutely sure that there was one particular thing that I've never done before? I mean, we were born as human beings so many times before. We were born as animals. We were born in other states of existence. We've had relationship with others. So it is likely that we've already have like a massive baggage of negative actions that we've done before, even if we can't remember all of them, even if we cannot assign a name and a date and an event and the strength of the event and the people involved in that event, even if we cannot bring on all that information to those negative actions, we've done them certainly before. And so we can think about them in general. We can think about specifics, but we can also think about it in general. That's the first part, the power of regret. How are we doing so far? All right. And so going back to the list of 4 powers, the first power is the power of support. And the support that we use for the purification of negative actions consists of 2 factors, refuge and bodhicitta. And it is linked up with the power of regret, because when we think in general about the ways in which we have behaved negatively, we can say that we have behaved negatively physically, verbally, and mentally. We've done this thing or the other thing. But also another way of looking at the negative actions that we've done before, we have done negative actions in relation to other living beings. So we have killed, we've engaged in stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech. We've wasted the time with idle talk and so forth. So we've harmed other living beings. But also we have done some negative actions in relation to the objects of refuge, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And so the power of the support is relying upon refuge and bodhicitta in order to purify negative actions that we have done in relation to other living beings, and also in relation to the three jewels. And so we purify negative actions that we've done in relation to the three jewels when we go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. We rely upon the power of bodhicitta in order to lay down negative actions that we do in relation to other living beings. I mean, definitely when we think of actions which are harmful to others, we would likely not to be so negative or harmful to others if our compassion would be strong, if our intention would be a bodhicitta intention. Particularly, I think that often, and I think that I've said it before, when I think of people that I look up to, people that I find inspiring, and I think of how their being is such that they're controlled, influenced by compassion, by bodhicitta. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is Holiness the Dalai Lama, Siddha Rinpoche, this Rinpoche, the other Rinpoche. Anyway, when I think of their behavior, I think that I find, I've seen no evidence of them being harmful to others. And so definitely the power of compassion and the power of bodhicitta would be such a strong power that will help us prevent or refrain from harming others. And so that's one power of support. In the process of purifying our negative actions, we rely upon bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, which is based on compassion. Second power is going for refuge. And so before we look at the two other powers, we can think about in general, for those of you who have done practices of purification together. I think that in a few days, can't remember what was the original plan, but I think that maybe during the weekend you're going to have a practice day together with Venerable Dundrup. And I believe that that part of the things that you will be doing is also practicing practices of purification. So often we use, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we use what we call sadhanas. So sadhana is a practice manual. So it streamlines everything in our practices. Often, it's so hard for us to know exactly what we need to do to practice the Dhamma. I remember that in the first few Lamrim courses or retreats that I've been to, I found them so inspiring, so amazing. But then in terms of knowing what to do myself and how to take it on as a daily practices, I was pretty much stumbling in the dark. And so we have sadhanas, we have practice manuals that streamline many things for us in our practice. And so when you look at one practice, for example, for purifying negative actions, the practice of the 35 Buddhas or the practice of Vajrasattva. Both of those practices include, first of all, at the very beginning, a recitation of refuge and bodhicitta. And so when we think of purifying negative actions, I think that this is how I start my practice. I mean, of course, we need also this motivating desire to purify negative actions that we have done before, with the power of regret, but we start with going for refuge and developing bodhicitta. So as much as we can in our practice, we don't want to rush through that stage. Actually, if we also in our practice, if we make sure that we spend at the beginning enough time on going for refuge, not just kind of recite those verse, the verse for going for refuge, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly, and so forth, but really mean it. To really mean it, we need to think of our precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, miserable states of existence, how we suffer in samsara, how others suffer in samsara. All of these we bring into going for refuge and developing bodhicitta. And so if we start a purification practice, Vajrasattva and so forth, with refuge and bodhicitta, we already have a good foundation for a practice of purification. Then we have the power of regret. And often the power of regret is said to be that This is how they say it in Tibetan. We need to have regret, regretting, a sense of regret for the negative actions that we've done before, as if we have taken poison. And the general description that is given is to think that if you were, suppose that you eat something quite delicious, but after ingesting it, you discover that it was dosed with, sprinkled with rat poison or with other potent poison. And that you know that soon enough that you will die, not only die, but also die in great agony. There is a sense of fear, but also a sense of regret that creeps in. And think that I wish I would never have it. I wish that did not happen. And so the type of regret that we want to develop is regret for negative actions that we've done before, in which we think that, well, the result of my negative action is definitely going to be suffering. I wish I hadn't done it before. I mean, it's difficult to feel that deep sense of regret at the beginning, as if we've taken poison, because we're not there yet. I mean, we don't have, at least when I speak of myself, I don't have that massive trust in karma that controls every minute of my life, in which when I perform even a slight negative action, I regret it as if I've taken poison. I'm not there yet. But part of it is developing better trust in karma. And, as the cliche says, fake it till you make it, so we think about it. And part of the practices that we do are very much involved with faking it, fake it till you make it. It begins with sometimes just saying the words. When we, I've said the words, the formula for refuge and bodhicitta so many times before, and part of it is fake it till you make it. Kind of over time, you put more content into it, and it starts to be more genuine. And so I think that with practices of purification, there is a bit of contrivance that comes together with a sense of regret. And I think that it's difficult for us sometimes to develop that deep sense of regret for different reasons. First of all, we're still not very convinced, or not all of us, I think that, but some of us are not absolutely convinced about the existence of past and future lifetimes. Now, if we are not absolutely convinced, hands down, about previous lifetimes and the actions that we've done in previous lifetimes, and all the effects that those actions might have over this and future lifetimes, there would be a lesser degree of conviction in our practice of purification. So we cannot fake it, or we can fake it until we make it. It cannot be. We have to go through that process. So that's one thing. Kind of a lesser or a less powerful conviction in the existence of past and future lifetimes, but also a lesser conviction in the working on karma, the working of karma. And I mean, it's fair enough. Many of us haven't started off as Buddhists. We are forming our Buddhist view. We are forming our attitudes towards Buddhist practice, to consideration of karma. So we just need to give it a lot of thought, but also a lot of time. It's not going to happen overnight. And so we think of a sense of regret, and we try to be as genuine as possible with that. Now, when we then read through some rituals, some prayers which are quite common in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, some of them seem to be pretty full on. Like, for example, for those of you who have done a 35 Buddha practice, so for those of you who have done other practices such as Nyungne and so forth, there is sometimes this prayer that we read, which is called general confession, that begins with Uhala, and then we recite all the different things that we might have done in previous lifetime, that we have rejoiced in the creation of which, that we have made other do. We have harmed the teachers, we have harmed other living beings, and so forth. It becomes pretty full on. When we do it in a big group, we tend to read through those rituals quite fast, If you have a fast reader, it's sometimes kind of supersonically fast. Or sometimes you have someone that slows down through that. We have one of the long-term members of the monastic community here at Chimrezek Institute is Venerable Elsa. I don't know if maybe some of you have met her before. She's been a nun forever, or at least more than 40 years. That says forever. Forever is for me. And she's a very fast reader, but also she has that incredible talent of perfect enunciation of each and every word. You don't miss out on any syllable and so forth. But still, for me, it's kind of, most of the things are kind of quite fast. They don't give me enough time to work with. So it's good to kind of also take those, you get used to doing them in group, and you have to work with your frustration when someone either reads it too slow or too fast, not in the right accent, not with the right not with the right emphasis on what works better for you, but use it as a basis for then later on, read it at home and work with the things that do work for you. And so we read through the power of regret. Now, I regret negative actions that I've done with my body, speech, and mind, that I've made others create, and that I've rejoiced in the creation of which. This is the power of regret. And then we have the power of restraint, which is the third power. Now, the power of restraint is often put together with the power of regret in the rituals or the sadhanas that we use. Henceforth, I shall never do that again in the future. I regret that, and therefore I will never do it again in the future. I mean, obviously, if we do have a deep sense of regret for something that we've done before, we will become more determined to not do it again in the future. That's the power of restraint. If we don't really have a sense of regret, it is likely that the sense of restraint that we'll develop would be limited. It would be qualified. It would not be absolute. It would be pretty qualified. And so, with the power of restraint, when we think that, for example, I have lied so many times, I've lied through my teeth. I've lied to my friends, I've lied to my parents, I've lied to my spiritual teachers, and so forth. I've rejoiced in the lying of others, I've caused others to lie, and so forth. I can think about it in different ways. And then I think, henceforth, I shall never do it again. I mean, obviously, if I bring that sense of confidence into my practice, it will help me to abstain from lying again in the future, particularly if I recognize the drawbacks of lying. But also, when I think about my ability to shun negative actions once and for all, I'm not there yet. I mean, even though I am committed to never, ever, never, ever lie again, it is likely that some degree of white lies will still occur in the future. I mean, I'm controlled still by karma and afflictions. It will happen in the future. And so when we often do such practices, we think that, when we think of Vajrasattva, for example, or when we think of the Buddha in general, so we visualize Vajrasattva in front of us, or the 35 Buddhas. And then we think, I've lied so many times in the past, and henceforth, I should never do it again. Well, I am going to probably lie again in the future. Not massively, but there would be something off in the future. So wouldn't it be like a lie? If I said that I shall never do it again, am I not lying? Am I not deceiving them? Well, I think that we can adopt two useful approaches to that. First of all, if we don't bring that sense of conviction and commitment to the promises that we make, if they would be faint-hearted, they'll have less power. We're likely to continue with greater forms or more forms of negative behaviors in the future. So it's good to at least try to make that commitments, but also together with when we recognize our current ability to abstain from negative actions, we can take short-term projects. So if I think that I should never lie, I will never lie in the future, it is likely to be a lie in itself. No. So rather than thinking that I shall never do it again, ever again, and making promise or making commitment not to do it ever again, I can decide on short-term goals. Tomorrow, I will try my best. No, so I will not lie again in the future, but particularly tomorrow and the following week, I will try to be as focused as I can and develop habits of abstaining from lying. Or we can think of other non-virtues of speech. What about, for example, harsh or harmful speech, divisive speech? If we become more determined that at least tomorrow, as much as I can, I will abstain from that. For the following week, I will abstain from that. And we become focused on that, we create positive habits. For that reason, it is said that it's good to take every once in a while one-day vow, like the 8 Mahayana precepts. We take those days, we take precepts during special days, but if we create habits in at least remaining really focused for one day, making sure that everything that we do is done deliberately, hopefully we'll be able to connect more and more dots in the future to a linear, continuous way of behaving positively, conscientiously, virtuously. So that's the power of restraint. Right? So we regret negative actions and we think henceforth, I should not do it again in the future. And then the last power is called the power of thorough application of the antidote. And so the power of thorough application of the antidote is said to be, let's look at what Lama Tsongkhapa said. So Lama Tsongkhapa mentions 6 antidotes in his presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment. So for those of you who read through Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, the great exposition on the steps of the path of enlightenment, in the first volume of the text that was translated into English, there's a section of karma. So it goes through the general characteristics of karma, then the specific characteristics of karma, the presentation of the 10 non-virtues, and then there is a chapter on cultivating ethical behavior. And so the chapter on cultivating ethical behavior goes through the 4 paths of the antidote, and Lama Tsongkhapa suggests 6 ways of using antidotes for negative actions that we have done before. And so these are found here. But before we go through them, I think it was last year that we went through a commentary to Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life here at Chimrezek Institute. It was either last year or the year before, I can't remember. But anyway, we used a really nice commentary to this text. And there's one part of the text, I think that it's in chapter number 2 of Shantideva's Guide, where he speaks about preparation for taking up bodhicitta. And the preparation for taking up bodhicitta has to do with creating space in our mind. So we accumulate the collections. We also purify negativities and obscurations, take out the garbage in order to be able to invite the mind of enlightenment into our mind. And so the commentary explained the practice of purification using the 4 paths of the antidote. And in relation to the power of thorough application of the antidote, I think that the point was that we can do different things. We can recite the Vajrasattva mantra, we can do prostrations, circumambulations, and so forth. But if we think of what would be the actual antidote to our negative actions, the actual antidote would be to create states of mind which are opposite to our afflictive states of mind. That would be a power of thorough application of the antidote. So, and I thought that this point is a pertinent point, because it's almost like, it's almost like the attitude that many have in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is focused on recitation and lots of rituals. And so if we have sinned, we have to say enough Hail Mary in order to purify that. That's the kind of attitude that many have. But the commentary that we were using was saying that, yeah, we can do those recitations, but really, when we think of our application of the antidote, if, for example, we have harmed others in a negative way because we were motivated by animosity or attachment or sense of pride or jealousy, to create the power of the antidote would be to develop, for example, love and compassion for others. That would be an antidotal power. It would be to practice giving. And to practice giving does not mean to say that we necessarily need to have a transaction where something moves from our possession to the possession of others, but we can think of, for example, sending everything positive that we have to others, our body, possessions, fruits of virtue. That's an incredible way of becoming generous, increasing the ability to give, increasing the wish to give. And so that is an antidote to miserliness, which is, if we antidote miserliness, we'll also be able to antidote harmful intentions towards others, inability to help them, or also attitudes of taking advantage of others because of our miserliness and so forth. So in short, to work with our mind, to develop genuine positive approaches in our mind, states of mind, that is the actual power of the antidote. That will be the thing that will eliminate negative actions that we do. Dorna?
Yeah, so I'm wondering if at this point, something like the 8 verses of mind training would come in. That would be a useful sort of overall antidote around this aspect of purification.
Hey, yeah, definitely, because you can think of the 8 verses. You spoke about the 8 verses, right? So the 8 verses are part of Mahayana mind training. And it says in the first verse, I shall hold all sentient beings as dear and supreme.
Okay.
I mean, bodhicitta is such an amazing, incredible purifying factor. It is said that when we, for example, develop bodhicitta in general, that the amount of merit that we create is so incredible. Bodhicitta is based on compassion. And so often we think of purification and accumulation as things that occur separately. But there are two sides of the same coin, in a sense that if we, for example, develop bodhicitta, we have an incredible accumulation of the collections, but also the opposite side of it is purification of negativities and obscurations. If we purify negativities and obscurations, particularly if we do that with that sincere intention to abstain from harming others, to be of benefit to others, we also accumulate in the collections. And so a recitation, not only a recitation, a meditation on the 8 verses of thought transformation is very powerful, but still, some of the 8 verses are providing more hands-on approach to certain situations. Like, for example, when someone who is trusted does me great harm,
right?
It's specific and we can apply it to a particular situation, but still in general, if we, in the power of thorough application of the antidote, we can think that I can recite Vajrasattva, but I can also meditate on the 8 verses for training the mind. We have all our bases covered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it really helpful just because things like revenge, right? Which is so, boy, I want to get back at you for doing that, or how dare you do that to me? I'm gonna, make you pay for it. Though, that kind of stuff I just find is really helpful. That stops me, makes me rethink not going in that direction, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we have that. And also we have kind of like this general ill will ill-willed intention. Now, when you think of world politics, for example, and people that, from my perspective, are kind of almost like the epitome of everything that is going wrong in the world, and are representations of, everyone's anger, attachment, and ignorance. Often it's hard to avoid kind of thinking to some degree that, if they were out of the equation, all of us would have been so much better off.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one for me too. Yeah,
that's I think that probably many of us struggle with that. Although we do not want to think like that, it's it happens. And so I think that also including that as part of our meditation on the 8 verses for training the mind can also become very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And so Lama Tsongkhapa suggests us 6 antidotes, and many things come under the banner of the 6 antidotes. We're going to look at them in a second. But also it says at the end of listing them down that this is just an example. It's not that it's an exhaustive list of antidotes. And so let's look at that. It says, first off, receiving transmissions of the sutras, retaining the meanings, and reading them. I mean, this is something that I find quite interesting. I think that when you have the chance to go to attend teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or those, someone like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, there's a lot of oral transmission that is happening during those teachings. And often I think, and I guess some other people think, I wish we had more teachings, more explanation rather than just reading. But Lama Tsongkhapa said actually that even receiving those transmissions is a powerful tool for purifying negative actions. I think that probably also has to do with the type of intention that we bring into it. If we hold those transmissions to be really dear to our heart, really important, then purifications will occur. So not only receiving transmission, but also to think of their meaning, and also to read through them, but not only to read through teachings, but also to think through them. So that's the first one. Then the second point, which I think that probably of this is one of the most important, if not the most important, is studying, reflecting, and meditating on emptiness. This is me paraphrasing what Lama Tsongkhapa said in his Lamrim Chemo. But I think that I said it maybe previously. I think that a few sessions ago, maybe it was in relation to something that Kodo brought up, I can't remember. But when we think of the process by which we end up creating negative actions, it all starts with ignorance. All of our afflictive states of mind are based on ignorance. So from ignorance, we pay an incorrect mental attentions to things around us. We either exaggerate positive qualities of a particular thing, and thereby we have attachment or craving or pride or jealousy and so forth, or we exaggerate the negative qualities. So with exaggeration of negative qualities, we have hostility and anger and resentment and attachment and so forth. And then we act based upon, and then anger and attachment arise. We act upon those actions, we end up experiencing suffering. And so since the very foundation is ignorance, that which remedies ignorance is emptiness. So studying emptiness, reflecting upon it, meditating on it, it's not an easy topic at all. It takes a long time to really sort it out, or start to feel more comfortable in the empty shoes of emptiness. But I remember that we had 2.5 years here at Chenrezig Institute in which we studied extensively Chandakirti supplement to the middle way. And it did feel over time that the more we chip in, the more we chip through our ignorance, we develop an insight into reality, the afflictive emotions become less relevant. And of course, we're still controlled by afflictive emotions, but there's more space to look at our mind from different perspectives. So studying about emptiness, reflecting upon it, meditating on it, hopefully will create some shift in the mind that will then be helpful in terms of applying an antidote to our negative actions, particularly in terms of reducing the power of our negative actions and developing the power of restraint. I think that someone put the hand up. Is
I
there
think it was just Drokar saying goodbye.
All right. Bye, Dokar. Thank you. All right. And so that's now to meditate on emptiness, of course, we need to give ourselves the space to study what emptiness means. So we often know we want to have an abridged presentation. We do get quite easy and simple presentation of emptiness, but also making sure that we get the full picture, particularly how great it would be if all of us would enjoy causes and conditions in the future for studying the classics, the writings of Nagarjuna, the writing of Chandrakirti, of Aryadeva, of Lama Tsongkhapa, and so forth, that will provide us a more solid understanding of the topic, but also an ability to link it up with so many other teachings. That would be great. So then next is recitation of mantra and other rituals. So this is, I think, where we can bring in practices of the 35 Buddhas, Vajrasattva, and so forth. Those practices that come together with a practice manual include all the other powers, but also the mantra recitation, making prostrations, making offerings, making circumambulations, and so forth. All of them are also acting as a remedy for negative actions that we've done before. Now, creating stupas, statues, tankas, and so forth. This is something that is very big in the FPMT. We are motivated by Lama Sopa Rinpoche in making those extensive, an extensive approach to this topic. And I think that maybe, when I think of the FPMT approach, or Lama Sopa Rinpoche approach, more specifically to certain practices, there's some things that I can relate to, things that I relate less to. We are different individuals. We have different inclinations. Not everything that one Lama does will affect us exactly in the same way. I see here in the Chenrezig Institute that people take to heart this practice of creating stupas and tsasas and statues, sponsoring tankas and so forth. And this is very much encouraged by Lama Sopa Rinpoche. And I think that kind of when you think about it here in relation to purifying negative actions, you can think of, that it gives you something to work with. It's not just kind of like a religious fervent approach to creating those images. You can also use that as a way of purifying negative actions done before. Then making offerings to Buddha images, to stupas and texts, also an excellent way of purifying negativities and obscurations. And finally, hearing the recitation and retaining the names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So thinking about, for example, the practice of the 35 Buddhas, in which we recite the names of the 35 Buddhas, that's one thing. But also, one of my closest teachers, the one that lives in Taiwan, has been for years leading practices which are based on the Sutra of Great Liberation, which haven't been fully translated into English yet, and hopefully it will at some point. But those practices which are based on the Sutra of Great Liberation consist of 3 recitations of the sutra during the day and 3 recitations during the night. So it's a 24-hour practice. And in between, there's a lot of like prostration and circumambulation and making offerings, like the whole lot. But I have no, and normally when I do this practice together with my teacher, I use kind of a massive Tibetan text, which has like 40 or 50 pages of just names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's the easiest part of the, maybe I shouldn't say that, I'll say it anyway. That's the easiest part of the sutra recitation because I can switch off and just recite the names. Anyway, it is said that kind of, and the sutra is particularly dedicated for the purification of negative actions. And so, I prostrated this to the Buddhas of the past, to the Buddhas of the present, to the Buddhas of the future, to the Bodhisattvas of the past, to the Bodhisattvas of the present, to the Bodhisattvas of the future. And there is a list of names of all those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Again, when we think about it in light of what Lama Tsongkhapa says, also going through something like that is a way of applying antidotes to the negative actions that we have done before. And so altogether, when I bring this topic of purification using the 4 powers of the antidote, we often think about it as a recitation of Vajrasattva, the mantra. 100-syllable mantra is what we need to do in order to purify our negativities. But the recitation of the mantra is part of it. The most important thing is to try as much as we can to think about karma and to generate some sense of regret for negative actions that we've done before, even if it's not exactly to the sentiment that the practices that we use indicate. We build up. We fake it and we make it. Lorna?
So I'm just wondering if, so in other words, what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying is, and those antidotes are really, we're generating merit. Generating merit is an antidote to purifying or not an antidote, but it's part of the purification of our negative actions.
I think that when we generate merit, we also purify negativities and obscurations. When we purify negativities and obscurations, we also generate merit. And so when we think of, for example, when we think of doing a Vajrasattva practice or 35 Buddha practice, it's a practice that is dedicated to purification. So you can sit, for example, for an hour, if you do it in a group, and you do a few rounds of mala of recitation of the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. You're also accumulating merit as you do that. Okay. No, it's not that we just purify negative actions. We also accumulating merit. Okay. Yeah. And so I think that those two things, the accumulation of merit or the generation of merit and purification of negativities and obscurations, they occur hand in hand.
Right, they're the both sides of the same coin kind of thing.
Yeah. Definitely. And so practices of purification. And as I said, I believe that you're going to do it together with Venerable Dundrup. So think about it as the power of regret is something that we need to pay attention to. That's kind of our main focus on those practices. Whether we do a beautiful recitation of the mantra or beautiful offering and so forth, we want to do it to our best ability. But the most important factor, the most crucial factor, is thinking of karma and trying to generate regret for actions that we have done before in thinking of the results of the negative actions that we do. So then when we think about it in this way, it seems that and as karma is presented in the sense of the path of those of the small scope, it seems that the orientation is pretty much personal, and that we regret negative actions that we have done before because we do not want to experience suffering. But we don't only, I think of the negative results that we will experience. We can also think of, we extend on that. We can also think of how it is harmful to others. Those actions are harmful to others. But also we can think of how, so long as we are under the control, under the sway of such negative actions, our Buddhahood will still be postponed and will be limited in our ability to be of benefit to others. I think that my brain juice is about to dry out for today.
Oh, you've done well with a foggy brain. Thank you.
I think that I've used so many words that I've left no words for anyone else.
But one of the things I found is that we sometimes say there, but by the grace of God do I.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you were saying that I'd never thought of in this way before is that sometime I might say, oh, Lorna did this and I would never do that. Kodo would do this and I would never do that. But in reality, if you look back at our karma, I have done that.
Yeah.
And so it's not just there, but by the grace of God, Dwyer, I would never do it, but maybe I would. Well, I actually have. And so that for me, that really struck me as a way to look at other people's actions and have empathy for them, to look at them. When we do the Vajrasattva practices, you're purifying yourself for yourself and others' sake, because when I do harm, it brings harm. When they do harm, it brings harm. And it really, for me, that was a really profound thing that you did tonight. So
thank you. Yeah, I think that, I agree with you, because particularly when I think of human capacity to inflict harm upon others. We sometimes look at places in the world where things are going horribly wrong, and with people, there's extreme cases of violence and harm, and we kind of think that I will never do something like that. That will never happen to me. But the capacity to act like that is still within us. The capacity is there. Even if we haven't done it in this life, it does not mean to say that we haven't done it before. And when conditions are there, it is possible that it will, that will happen. Particularly when I think of, for example, without going into full-on political expose, but having grown up in Israel and looking at the situation of the situation in Israel, occupation of the Palestinian territories, and military control of the Palestinian territories and so forth. You can see that kind of I think that the seed for violence is present, and you can see how people can end up doing things which are horribly wrong when conditions are there. So from afar, it is easy to think that I will never do something like that. But sometimes, if we are put in that situation, it is possible that we'll behave in no way that we will, that we would never think that we would do otherwise. So we have done it before, likely, or maybe we've done things which are similar, which are difficult for us to recognize, to identify. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for coming along. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to look at karma again. Thank you very much, Michael. Definitely, I would like to thank Venerable Dundrup and all the people that are connected with Thupten Nobuling. I think that they make it possible for us to enjoy the teachings of the Buddha. And so may we be able to do it again in the future. Maybe at some point also meet face-to-face in Australia, in India, the US, who knows? Canada. So are you in Canada, Lorna? All right, we're in Canada.
British Columbia, Victoria, Vancouver Island, West Coast.
Oh, one of my best friends here is from Vancouver Island.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Where on the island, do you know?
I don't know, but his parents have those. I don't know if you are aware of Battlestar Galactica. That was a really good sci-fi series. They had I think that one of the opening scenes was on Vancouver Lake or whatever. There is a lake. Anyway, his parents.
Well, there's a few lakes on Vancouver Island.
Anyway, kind of he said that his parents are from there and blah 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 blah.
Oh, Cowichan Lake, maybe? Does that ring a bell? No.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's beautiful. I love the island. It's I live in a beautiful part of the world, for sure.
That's great. Yeah. I rejoice. So let's finish off with dedicating. So thank you very much. And we'll dedicate, first of all, for the development of bodhicitta, and then for unbecoming of Buddhahood, then for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and finally for all of our teachers, beginning with Lama Zopa Rinpoche. May the Supreme Jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow. And may that which is arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. Several of the Snowland teachings and transmigrated beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You uphold the Sibu's moral way, who serves in the manifold bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majuna's victorious doctrine. Who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Several of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Get
much.
well.
That was just some of the best teaching that I've been to. So thank you.
Very much
Thank
enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It was fantastic.
Thank you, Gela.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Venerable. Thank you.